Americans will soon need visas to enter Iceland. New names have been approved. The president attends a metal festival and more on this episode of the Reykjavík News Desk. So first up on the Reykjavík News Desk, if you've been enjoying visa-free travel to Europe, those days may soon be coming to an end, depending on what country you're from and what country in Europe you want to visit. This is on account of a thing called the ETIAS. Now, this is a new set of rules for people traveling to Europe, wherein people from select countries will need to apply for a visa to enter some 30 European countries. This will allow you to stay for up to 90 days in a 180-day period in any of these 30 countries. I've linked to the website that details all these rules in a very straightforward and easy to understand manner. That link is in the description below. But before you start panicking, don't worry. These rules will not be going into effect until 2024. Amongst the countries affected will be the United States. Yes, U.S. citizens will have to apply for a visa to enter Iceland. And this has made some actors in the Icelandic tourism industry a little bit nervous because Americans comprise about 41% of our tourists. But, I really don't think that there's much to worry about. And this is because, as anybody who's ever traveled from the United States to any other country can tell you, we already have to deal with a lot of bureaucracy and paperwork, and we've kind of become inoculated to bureaucracy to be able to travel. Like, just to get a passport can be pretty daunting. At least it was for me when I first applied for mine. I needed a whole pile of documents to prove who I was to get this passport. And I remember one part of the process, I went to the MTA, which is Maryland's equivalent of the DMV, in order to get a state ID card. And they told me you can't get a state ID card without a Social Security card. So I went to the Social Security office to get this card, and they said you can't get that without a Maryland state ID. And this is a mild experience compared to some of the stories I've heard. So it's really no surprise that just less than half of Americans even own a passport, and even then, it varies a lot by state to state. In other words, just the process of being an American and getting a passport kind of inoculates you to travel bureaucracy. So applying for a visa and paying a €7 fee, I don't think is going to be that much of a barrier to entry. Anyways, in whichever country you live in, definitely check out the ETIAS website that I've linked below to see how you can apply, whether or not it applies to you in the first place, what rules and conditions lie within, etc., to get you well prepared ahead of the changes going into effect in 2024. In other news, Landmannalaugar, a stunning display of Icelandic wilderness, showcasing some of the most stunning vistas you will ever see of the Icelandic Highlands. Also soon to be home to a bigger parking lot, a gift shop, a restaurant, and more. This decision is certainly a controversial one because the earlier opening of just a swimming pool in the area drew a lot of criticism as kind of ruining the vibe of visiting Landmannalaugar. The chair of the district council for the region, Eggertvarð Guðmundsson, told people that they need to calm down, that they're not going to build all this stuff at once. They're going to start by making the parking lot bigger, and they're going to put down some walking paths, and that they're going to build a service center. Interestingly, the National Planning Agency, and reviewing these plans for development, suggested that they conduct surveys wherein they ask tourists and tourism companies whether or not there's even a demand for all this stuff. And the council chair just basically responded like this meme. So it looks like this is happening whether we like it or not. In sadder news, this tragic story is a great example of how legislation that is directed at the most vulnerable people in our society can have dire consequences. This woman, Blessing Uzoma, who's originally from Nigeria, was forced into sex work by a human trafficking ring many years ago. And 5 years ago, she fled Italy for Iceland. Sadly, the story does not end with her having a safe and secure life here in this country. No, rather, the Directorate of Immigration rejected her application for international protection, and then she was presented with a document as a part of a new law on immigration. And this law is so terrible, I did an entire video about it. And this document that she was asked to sign stated that if she does not leave the country within 30 days, she would be stripped of health care and her food allowance and even her shelter. If she didn't sign this agreement, she was told, she would lose all these things immediately. So now she's facing houselessness, no access to health care, and no access to food or to be sent back to Italy, where a human trafficking ring had forced her into sex work in the first place. Now, this law has been criticized by numerous NGOs across the country who have pointed out that it violates Iceland's constitution, that it breaks European human rights law, but that did not stop this government from passing this law. And as a result of this story, many members of the general public are shocked. We have members of parliament who are speaking up against it. And yeah, it's a surprise to a lot of people that when someone comes to this country and they apply for international protection, they want to work, but the law forbids them from working. They're legally not allowed to work while their application is being processed. Furthermore, a lot of people don't know that the Directorate of Immigration often does not even examine these cases. They don't even open them. They just default to rejecting them outright. Now, the decision to deport Blessing can be reversed at any time. Icelandic law allows authorities to grant international protection to people for humanitarian reasons, and that could certainly be done in this case. But whether or not that's going to be done remains to be seen. But even if it is, frankly, this entire law needs to be scrapped. In other news, so I've mentioned in a few videos the dispute that goes on about the domestic airport being in the center of Reykjavík. But one aspect of this that I overlooked, helicopters. Normally, helicopters are not a super big deal to us who live downtown. They're not a big part of the air traffic to and from the domestic airport. Planes taking off and landing and roaring through the sky, yeah, that definitely contributes to the noise, but helicopters, not that much. Well, that changed with the eruption, as there have been numerous helicopter tours per day with helicopters taking off from and landing at the domestic airport every single day. Reykjavík með Dagbjörg Eggertsson wants these helicopter flights to be moved to a smaller airport in Hólmsheiði, which is like in the eastern edge of Reykjavík. And frankly, it's not that far from downtown, and anyone that can afford a helicopter tour, they can afford to rent a car. Well, despite the government making an agreement to develop the Hólmsheiði airport some 10 years ago, not very much has been done, but who knows? Maybe this time they'll actually get the ball rolling and we can move the helicopters out of the city center. In better news, archery. I've always wanted to take archery lessons. It seems pretty cool. Well, now archery got even cooler because Gumi Guðjónsson, who is the head of the Icelandic Archery Association, was given the Gender Equity Award for 2023 at the World Archery Meet in Berlin. He was specifically given this award for his work in encouraging trans and non-binary people to take up archery as a hobby, and he downplayed this, saying he doesn't feel as though he should be awarded for something that should be a given. What a guy. So maybe I'll take up archery. I mean, I am a Sagittarius, so it would make sense. Next up, a new batch of names have been approved. In case you weren't aware, Iceland has a naming committee, wherein if you want to name yourself or your child a name that's not on the legally approved list of names, you have to submit this name to the naming committee, who will then judge this name based on its accordance with Icelandic grammar, its historicness, and other factors. Last month, this committee approved the feminine names Michelle, Pan, and Indica. They approved the masculine name Austin, ergo the Austin Powers image being used with this article you see here, and the gender-neutral name Stitni. One of the other metrics that the committee uses to judge whether or not to approve a name is whether or not, in their estimation, a child would use this name to bully another child. And to that, I'm just like, have they ever met children? A child will use literally any name and turn it into something embarrassing if they really want to pick on you. I mean, I don't think this should be a part of the criteria at all. And now, you guessed it, animal news, two-parter. First off, they do a yearly seal census in the Northwest District of Húnaþing Vestra. And this year, the census is showing fewer seals than usual, having gone from 595 seals to 549. Now, this in itself is not cause for alarm. It's not a huge difference in the seal population. Maybe some of these seals went to do other things. Maybe humans being humans, we missed some of them. Who knows? Well, I have my own theory about this, and we'll get to that later. Because take a look at this. The Icelandic eagle population is on the rise. It wasn't too long ago that their numbers were so low that they were practically considered endangered, but now they're practically thriving, and it's estimated that their numbers could double over the next 10 years. So seals are decreasing, eagles are increasing. I think you see where I'm going with this. That's right. Our seals are magically transforming into eagles. Now, I'm not saying this is definitely happening, or that one thing is caused by the other. I'm just stating the facts. And the facts are the number of seals are decreasing, the number of eagles are increasing, and there's no proof that the seals are not magically transforming into eagles. So, you be the judge. Finally, President of Iceland, Guðni Th. Jóhannesson, will be attending the Wacken Open Air Metal Festival in Germany this year. At this festival, a grand total of 4 Icelandic metal bands will be playing: Skálmold, Solstafir, Crow's, and the Vintage Caravan. But what I thought was interesting about this news is that Guðni will not only be attending as the guest of honor and watching the bands perform, but afterwards, the president of Iceland will be part of a panel discussion with the organizers of this music festival to discuss the Icelandic metal scene and its connection with the Nordic cultural tradition. Now, Guðni is known for a lot of things, but I had no idea he was into metal. But he is an historian. That was actually his first job. He literally wrote the book on the economic crash. It's called Hrunið. So a historian's perspective on the Icelandic metal scene and its connection to the Nordic cultural tradition, yeah, that should be pretty interesting stuff. That's all I have for you today on the Reykjavík News Desk. Again, be sure and like and subscribe. And just to give you a little update, my video on my hitchhiking stories will be coming up on August 14th. Now, if you haven't been following this, my Patreon, I regularly post viewer polls for patrons to be able to vote on what single topic to delve into in depth in my next single topic video. And me telling my stories of hitchhiking around Iceland was the one that won. So I'll be doing a video recounting all of my various adventures hitchhiking around the country. And that'll be coming up on August 14th. Also, the Saturday after that, which is, let me just check. Yes, August 19th at 1600 GMT, I'll be holding my next Ask Me Anything session. And as the name might suggest, this is a chance for people to join a live call and ask me anything about myself, about News Desk, about Iceland, whatever. But it's usually just a chance for all of us to hang out and have a laugh. We always have a great time, and I'd love to see you there. The viewer poll and the AMA are both things that you can participate in through my Patreon, which is linked in the description below. Which reminds me, I want to thank Corinne Vasquez, Marianne Ward, Christopher Hunter, Marianne Moores, Kimberly McDaniel, Iceman98, Octavia Hrundsjónsdóttir, and Alan Velgame for being patrons on the $20 level, Ian Kingsley and Laura Johnson for being patrons on the $15 level, and Melissa Pfeffer, Christine Trowbridge, Hafstein Himmelregenson, Stephen Ellis, and Vivi Carvalho Schaffner for being patrons on the $10 level. You folks rock. That's all from me at News Desk. Be good to each other.